Honor to welcome Captain Larkin O'Hearn to the stage. Captain O'Hearn will first provide tribute remarks about military medicine and will then introduce our 2014 Hero of Military Medicine Senior Leader Awardee, Captain O'Hearn.
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, thank you for giving me this opportunity to offer my humble tribute to the heroes of military medicine who have had such a profound impact on my life. It's fair to say that without them, I would not be standing here in front of you today. In fact, I might not be here at all. I was actually born in an Army hospital at Fort Lewis, Washington, many years ago. Not as many as some of you. And I've been cared for by those same dedicated professionals ever since. I've experienced care at every level, from on the battlefield in Kandahar to the Army's prestigious Institute for Surgical Research at the San Antonio Military Medical Center, and everywhere in between. I'd like to take a few minutes tonight to tell you the story of the amazing men and women of all services who kept me alive, helped me heal, and gave me the skills and tools and hope to return to active duty. This story begins with Specialist John Benninghoffen, Benny. He was my platoon medic, one of the best soldiers that I had. He thought he was an infantryman. I routinely had to correct him, remind him. That was not his job. We appreciated his motivation and his hustle, but Benny, please get in the back. He was the first person to reach me when I stepped on an IED while on patrol in the Zari district of Kandahar, Afghanistan. And at that point, when he found me, I was pretty much a mess. Right hand gone, left leg gone, right leg shattered, just regaining consciousness, and in pretty terrible pain. I think we could say the worst day of my life. And yet, what I remember from that day, above anything else, was looking up at Benninghoffen and believing him when he said that I was going to be okay. Surrounded by chaos and confusion, he was calm and collected. I had no idea what he was doing. I later learned that he applied tourniquets to all four of my limbs and packaged me for evacuation. But I think the most important thing that he did was convince me that I was going to be okay. From there, an Army dust-off medevac team took over, building on the work that he had done, stabilizing me on the Black Hawk for the short ride to Kandahar Airfield and handing me off to the surgeons waiting at the Roll 3 clinic there. After several surgeries, including one to remove my right leg below the knee, those surgeons stabilized me to travel to Bagram for more surgeries and eventually for a flight to Landstuhl, Germany. During each of these flights, I was accompanied by a critical care air transport team, 4 highly trained Air Force doctors and nurses. These teams dramatically reduced the time between being injured on the battlefield and receiving that first rudimentary care and then being treated at the most advanced medical facilities available, saving lives, I think including mine, and reuniting soldiers with their families. The doctors and nurses who took over once I got back stateside were no less impressive. As I passed through each level of care and eventually began rehabilitation as an outpatient, each new provider continued to build seamlessly on the work of their predecessors, whether that was trauma surgeons handing off to orthopedic surgeons, handing off to prosthetists and physical therapists and social workers. As much as all of these medical professionals should be recognized for their technical skills and professional competence, which I would tell you tonight are second to none, they have created innovative solutions for complex traumatic injuries like mine, which is the nice way to say people that are really, really messed up. They take that mess and really put it back together. But above the technical skill and the advancements in medicine that have come through these 12 years of war, what stands out to me about these providers most was their humanity. I was unconscious for most of the first week after I was injured, but the way they treated my family was amazing. From the Bagram ICU nurse that put a phone down next to the bed so that I could hear my wife's voice all the way from America, and she could explain that I was reacting, that I could hear it, that I knew it, to the C-17 flight crew, that CCAT team that shared their homemade dinner with my wife on the long flight from Landstuhl to Bethesda when she was the only civilian on the plane, to my trauma surgeon who routinely answered text messages on Saturdays when I had questions about something that didn't feel right or a rehab thing that I didn't understand. At every turn, their compassion was as impressive as their competence. That compassion was really embodied for me by a surgical resident who had been my team leader a few years before at West Point. And now he was working in San Antonio doing his residency. And I'd become close to the family of a young Marine whose injuries were much worse than mine. His family didn't really explain that to me, and so I was showing them all my prosthetics, and they thought that this was maybe what was out there for their son. And I knew my friend was working on the same ward as the injured Marine, and I asked him, do you know this guy? And he told me that he did, and he said, Larkin, I've been caring for him for the past week. And the words that he used, caring for, stood out to me. Not working on or treating or operating on, caring for. That conversation epitomizes my experience with military medicine. Every step of the way, from operating rooms to rehab centers, I know that I and thousands of other soldiers like me have been cared for by the finest medical professionals in the world. One of my favorite Army doctors used to tell visitors to the rehab center, if you meet a soldier in an airport, buy him a cup of coffee, but if you meet a medic, buy him a steak. And I would like to add to that list that the doctors and nurses who staff our military treatment facilities, both in theater and here at home. During this war, we have asked much of our medical professionals, and they have more than answered that challenge. Our survival rates and rehab outcomes are better than ever before, thanks to the dedication and competence and resilience of our military medical professionals. And it takes a special kind of person to work day in and day out on complex and often hopeless cases. After I had been home for a few months, I realized that while I only saw the casualties that my unit took, many of the men and women who had helped me had cared for every casualty coming out of 2 theaters of war for years at a time. Every casualty. Every night, another plane load, another mother and father waiting anxiously in the hall, another young American with his life and limbs and future in their hands. I know that the professionalism, care, and compassion of these military medical professionals who helped me so much reflects the emphasis and priority on warrior care that begins at the very top of our armed forces. Leaders set priorities and reinforce them with their time and attention. Senior leader time may be the most valuable commodity in Washington. When it's used up, even Congress can't appropriate more. Tonight, I have the honor to introduce an Army senior leader who has been instrumental in setting the conditions for the successful recovery and transition of thousands of soldiers, Chief of Staff of the Army, General Ray Odierno. General Odierno has commanded at every echelon, from platoon to corps, and today serves as the 38th Chief of Staff of the United States Army. He has led American soldiers for more than 38 years in conflicts from Desert Storm to Operation Iraqi Freedom. As Chief of Staff, he has committed himself and the Army to unwavering care and support for wounded soldiers and their families. General Odierno visited the rehab facility in San Antonio while I was recovering, and I remember being struck by his genuine interest, not just in recovering soldiers, but in the physical therapists and prosthetists whose hard work made these recoveries possible. I remember watching his fascination with the IDEO brace that allowed soldiers to run on shattered limbs and even return to active duty. We say in the Army, soldiers do what leaders check. That day, the man with the most valuable time in the Army spent it checking on his wounded and recovering soldiers. And to those soldiers, it made all the difference. Ladies and gentlemen, the 2014 Hero of Military Medicine Senior Leader Honoree, General Ray Odierno.
Well, I didn't expect that, so I'm not quite sure what to say. Admiral Winterfeld, thank you for being here. Tina Jonas, thank you. Honorable Woodson, thank you for your remarks. John Lowe, thank you. The Jackson Foundation. My great friend Ken Fisher, you heard about what Ken does to help our soldiers with the Fisher House, but I have many other different experiences with Ken. And one I remember specifically is 2007, and probably the most difficult times we had in Iraq. Ken Fisher was there, and he went with me for a whole day, probably to the most remote and difficult places that were going on in Iraq at the time, because he didn't want to just visit soldiers. He wanted to see those who are out there at the most forward and remote places. That's who Ken Fisher is. So Ken, it's an honor for me to even share this stage for you and everything that you did. And thank you so much, Ken, for what you've done for so many soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marine, Coast Guardmen, and their families. We will never forget it. Thank you, sir. I have to be honest that getting this award, I really don't think I'm worthy to get this award, because I have the honor and privilege to lead the great men and women that serve our nation. And it's an honor to do that. It's a privilege. And especially those who work in the medical field. And as I think about that, I think about the medics. The thousands of medics who, under fire, are there at the most important time, the first 10 minutes of an injury. You just heard Captain O'Hearn talk about that. What they do is incredible. I think about our medevac pilots who fly under fire, who will fly in the worst weather to the worst places to pick up our wounded. I think about the aerial medevac medics. I was just in Afghanistan a month ago, and I had this medic showing how proud he was of now how they can do transfusions all the way forward and on the aircraft because of new technology. This guy was 22 years old. He understood that better than anybody, and he was so proud of what he was doing. I think about the nurses. I always tell everyone when I go, the nurses are my most favorite people in the world. They are the most compassionate, experienced people who on a daily basis help our wounded warriors to recover. And they do it with a compassion that is unparalleled. I think about our doctors who are forward, who do surgeries in some of the worst conditions. I think of our doctors who are back, around the huge medical centers that we have, developing new techniques, the best doctors in the world, there for our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Coast Guardmen. I think about the researchers who come up with new products, whether it be the IDEO device that Captain O'Hearn mentioned, or whether it be new prosthetics, or whether it be new techniques that allow us to have the highest survival rate off the battlefield. That's who I think about. I think about the compassion of our occupational and physical therapists as I watch them work day in and day out to make sure that our soldiers have the greatest advantage to get themselves better, because all they want to do is get back out there and contribute again. And I think finally about our wounded warriors. Whenever I've been around them, they inspire me. They inspire me with their determination. They inspire me with their service. They inspire me with being proud of who they are and who they work with. But the most important thing to remember is because of all of these professionals, that's why we have ease of mind when we go on the battlefield. Because we know we have this network of professionals behind us that will do everything that they can to ensure that our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines will be taken care of. And I can't tell you how important that is when we ask our young men and women to do very difficult things. So it's my honor that I have the opportunity to lead these incredible men and women. I thank you for the recognition, but truly I receive this honor on their behalf, on all that they do every day to serve and give back. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, General Odierno, and congratulations on your award. Well deserved.